Good afternoon, everyone. Today I'll be doing the fifth chapter of the text Vistas, and the name of the chapter is Should Visit Hit Mommy? All right, and that's a very light-hearted tale. All right, it's a very simple story about a father and his daughter. All right, how a father cooks up stories every afternoon to help his daughter go to sleep. All right, and though the story in itself is very simple, all right, it's a light-hearted and you can even say at times comedic story which the father tells his child, but then there's a message. All right, now what the story is actually about is that through this story, all right, through this story, it deals with the question of authority and parenting. All right, now in this chapter you will come across a certain character named Roger. All right, and now through the story of Roger, the narrator Jack, that is the father, wants to emphasize on the fact that mothers are always right and they know what is best for their child. Jo, that is the daughter, on the other hand, is inquisitive and young. For her, friendship and social acceptance are the most important things. She is therefore unhappy with the ending and wants her father to change it. But Jack doesn't want to listen to her because he wants to insist on the importance of individuality and the acceptance of what is natural. His perspective is more matured when compared to his daughter, who is young and unrealistic. So, this basically means it's a story about, in very simple terms, generation gap, all right? Of how the thinking of the parents differ from the thinking of their child, and how friends and the kind of trend that they follow seems to have an influence even on a very young child like Joe, right? It's a very serious message of generation gap which is delivered to us in a very light-hearted story, all right? And so we begin reading the story titled Should Visit Hit Mommy by John Updike. All right, now pardon my slow reading because I've been using a phone to do the text, as I seem to have misplaced my text. All right, so I'll be doing the very best I can, and I hope you are getting the chapter, or I hope you will get the chapter, sorry. And anyway, earlier someone, we have completed a lot. All right, we have completed a lot of chapters, and I have been giving you regular assignments, and I hope that you have been completing those assignments, and I hope you're sincerely attempting those questions which I have been passing on to you, and you are, most importantly, you are understanding all the poems and the poetry that, prose and the poetry that we have completed so far, right? So for today, I begin with the fifth chapter titled Should Visit Hit Mommy? In the evenings and for Saturday naps, like today's, Jack told his daughter Jo a story out of his head. This custom began when she was 2, was itself now nearly 2 years old, and his head felt empty. So like every Saturday, all right, in the evenings, all right, in every evening and on Saturdays, the father named Jack used to tell his daughter Jo a short story, all right, a story out of his head. He did not read a storybook or anything like that. It was just a story out of his imagination. Whatever it came to his mind, he cooked up the story for his daughter. And he had been doing so since the daughter was 2 years old, and it had already been 2 years. So now the daughter is nearly 4 years, and the father is still continuing with the tradition of telling his daughter short stories before she takes her afternoon or evening naps. Each new story was a slight variation of a basic tale. A small creature, usually named Roger, Roger Fish, Roger Squirrel, Roger Chipmunk, had some problem and went with it to the wise old owl. The owl told him to go to the wizard, and the wizard performed a magic spell that solved the problem, demanding in payment a number of pennies greater than the number the Roger creature had, but in the same breath directing the animal to a place where the extra pennies could be found. Then Roger was so happy, he played many games with other creatures and went home to his mother just in time to hear the train whistle that brought his daddy home from Boston. So his story was very simple, all right? On most of the time, the background of the story was the same, all right? It almost every time had a character named Roger, and it was an animal representation of a person, all right? It could be Roger fish, it could be Roger squirrel, it could be Roger frog, whatever, but the name of the protagonist of his story was usually Roger. And normally के हुन्थ्यो अरे Roger भन्ने animal जुन चाहिँ छ, he used to run into some kind of trouble. All right, and for advice to get out of that trouble, he would go and talk to the wise old owl. All right, there was an owl, and he used to go to the owl for advice. And the owl would send that particular Roger animal to a wizard. All right, and the wizard would hold all the answers. All right, wizardly, I will solve your problems, but you have to pay me. All right, in so and so pennies. All right, you have to give me so many pennies. And usually के हुन्थ्यो अरे that Roger animal कमा चाहिँ त्यति pennies हुन्थेन अरे जहिले पनि supposedly the wizard says I want 12 pennies, then Roger would have only around 8 or 9 pennies जहिले पनि short हुन्थ्यो अरे. But then again त्यो problem पनि wizardले solve गर्थ्यो अरे. Wizardले के भन्थ्यो, you go to such and such a place and you will find the extra pennies, and the Roger animal would go there, get the extra pennies, pay the wizard, and then his problems would come to an end. So that was basically the story. And the Roger animal घर फर्किन्थ्यो अरे, and that Roger animal को father, he would come back from work in a train from Boston. All right. Jack described their supper and the story was over. So उसको father आइसकेर त्यहाँदेखि everything well and good. All right. Wizardले problem solve गरिदियो. Roger animal is very happy, they have their dinner, and the story comes to a happy ending. And that was usually the story, and it had been going on for almost 2 years now. Working his way through the scheme was especially fatiguing on Saturday because Joe never fell asleep in naps anymore, and knowing this made the ride seem futile. But recently, all right, it was getting tiring for Jack, because now Joe wasn't a 2-year-old, she was almost 4, and she didn't want to sleep so much. All right, nap and his father was finding it more and more futile. All right, he found the storytelling tradition a bit useless now. All right, because paila ke hunthe, he used to tell the story and the daughter would go to sleep, but now she didn't want to sleep, especially on Saturdays. The little girl, not so little anymore. The bumps her feet made under the covers were halfway down the bed. The big double bed that they let her be in for naps, and when she was sick, had at last arranged herself, and from the way her fat face, deep in the pillow, shone in the sunlight, sifting through the drawn shades, it did not seem fantastic that some magic would occur, and she would take a nap like an infant of 2. Her brother Bobby was 2 and already asleep with his bottle. Jack asked, "Who shall the story be about today?" So father wanted his daughter to sleep, all right? And usually the children, both Joe and her brother, used to sleep in the parents' bed, all right? Tholo bed there they used to take the afternoon naps. And the brother was already asleep because he was just 2 years old. Excuse me. Because the brother was only 2 years old. And now the father knows that he has to continue with the tradition to help his daughter go to sleep. And so he asked her, as he used to do every day, "So, who shall the story be about today?" All right. So he asked his daughter, "So tell me, whose story do you want to hear about today?" Roger, Joe squeezed her eyes shut and smiled to be thinking. She was thinking. Her eyes open. Her mother's blue. "Skunk," she said firmly. So कसको story सुन्ने भन्दा उले immediately के भन्यो? Roger. But then, as you know, Roger has to be a certain animal. So she closed her eyes and she was thinking, all right. And when she opened her eyes, her father realized that she had her mother's exact blue eyes. And then she said, Skunk. I want to hear a story about Roger Skunk. A new animal. They must have talked about skunks at nursery school. Having a fresh hero momentarily stirred Jack to creative enthusiasm. All right, he said. Once upon a time, in the deep dark woods, there was a tiny little creature by the name of Roger Skunk, and he smelled very bad. So the father was a bit surprised as well, all right, because the daughter said Roger Skunk. A skunk was an animal which his father had not mentioned before. So he thought that she must have learned about the animal from nursery school. And even he was happy. Now he has a new animal to work on. And so he began, all right, that once upon a time there was an animal named Roger Skunk in the jungle. And he smelled very bad, as skunks normally do, all right. Yes, Joe said. He smelled so bad that none of the other little woodland creatures would play with him. Joe looked at him solemnly. She hadn't foreseen this. Whenever he would go out to play, Jack continued with jest, remembering certain humiliations of his own childhood. All the other tiny animals would cry, "Oh, oh, here comes Roger Stinky Skunk." And they would run away, and Roger Skunk would stand there all alone, and two little round tears would fall from his eyes. The corners of Joe's mouth dropped down, and her lower lip bent forward as he traced with a forefinger along the side of her nose the course of one of Roger Skunk's tears. So the father continued. He said that he smelled so bad that none of the animals used to play with him. And he even took examples of his own life, all right? Maybe even he was treated badly during his childhood. So he said that Roger Skunk smelled so bad that no other animals wanted to play with him. That whenever Roger Skunk came out to play, all the other animals would go, "Oh, oh, here comes Roger Stinky Skunk," and they would run away. And Roger would stand there all alone with tears in his eyes. And when he said these words, he could notice that even his daughter was sad. The sides of her lips had went down, all right, and he could see that her eyes were wet as well, all right. She was feeling sorry for Roger Skunk. "Won't he see the owl?" she asked in a high and faintly roughened voice. Now, like I told you before, he had been telling the same kind of story for 2 long years, all right? It's just that the name of the animal would be different. Not the name, but the animal would be different. Roger Chicken, Roger Fox, Roger Giraffe. So she knows, all right, that if any problem comes to any animal named Roger, that Roger goes to the owl for help. So she was quick to comment, "Won't she go to the owl?" Sitting on the bed beside her, Jack felt the covers tug as her legs switched tensely. He was pleased with this moment. He was telling her something true, something she must know, and had no wish to hurry on. But downstairs, a chair scraped, and he realized he must get down to help Claire paint the living room woodwork. So Joe felt very happy, right, that the child was very inquisitive, that she was listening to every word he was saying, all right, and he was in no hurry to complete the story. He wanted to taste that moment. But then he heard chairs being shifted downstairs, and he realized that he had to help his wife Claire paint the woodwork in the living room. Well, he walked along very sadly and came to a very big tree. And in the tip top of the tree was the enormous, wise old owl. So as usual, Roger Skunk goes to see the owl about his problem. Good. That was Joe, right? And she's very happy that now Roger Skunk is going to talk to the wise old owl. "Mr. Owl," Roger Skunk said, All the other little animals run away from me because I smell so bad. So do you, the owl said. Very, very bad. What can I do? Roger Skunk said. And he cried very hard. So Roger Skunk went to the owl and said, Mr. Owl, please help me. All the animals run away from me because I smell very bad. And even the owl said, yes, that is true. You smell not only bad, but you smell very, very bad. And then Roger Skunk said, please help me. What should I do? And then he started crying. The wizard, Joe shouted and sat right up, and a little golden book spilled from the bed. Now, Joe, Dad is telling the story. Do you want to tell Daddy the story? No, you, me. So even before Father could complete the story, because she knows what the story is about, she started shouting, the wizard, he should go to the wizard. And Father said, well, if you want me to tell you the story, then you have to listen to me. Otherwise, you tell me the story. Tell me, do you want me to tell you the story, or rather would you tell me the story? And she said, fine, you tell me the story. And the father continues. Then lie down and be sleepy. Her head relapsed into the pillow and she said, out of your head. Well, the owl thought and thought. At last he said, why don't you go see the wizard? And so the owl finally gave the advice to Roger Skunk and he said, fine, why don't you go see the wizard? That's the only person that can help you. Then Joe says, Daddy. And Jack says, what? Are magic spells real? This was a new phase. Just this last month, a reality phase. When he told her spiders eat bugs, she turned to her mothers and asked, do they? Really? And when Claire told her God was in the sky and all around them, she turned to her father and insisted, with a sly yet eager smile, is he really? They are real in stories, Jack answered curtly. She had made him miss a beat in the narrative. The owl said, go through the dark woods, under the apple trees, into the swamp, over a crook. So, when he talked about wizard, naturally the question of magic spells came. And Joe asked a very intelligent question now, all right? She's not 2 anymore. She's nearly 4. And she said, are magic spells real? So she was starting to question, or rather ask question, which were very logical. And this was not the first time, all right? When father had mentioned that spiders eat bugs, she had questioned her mother. Do they really? And when the mother had commented that God is always looking at you from the sky, again, Joe had questioned her father. Is he really? So she was now beginning to question things, all right, which she did not understand. She was kind of asking intelligent questions. And so the father also gave her an answer when she said, are magic spells real? And he said, well, they are real in stories. Not in real life, but in stories, they are very real. A little river over the creek, and there will be the wizard's house. And that's the way Roger Skunk went. And pretty soon he came to a little white house, and he rapped on the door. Jack rapped on the windowsill, and under the covers, Joe's tall figure clenched in an infantile thrill. And then a tiny little old man came out with a long white beard and a pointed blue hat and said, hey, what's this? What you want? You smell awful. The wizard's voice was one of Jack's own favorite effects. He did it by scrunching up his face and somehow whining through his eyes, which felt for the interval room. He felt being an old man suited him. And so finally, taking directions from the owl, Roger Skunk reached the wizard's place and he knocked on the door, and the door was answered by a wizard. One person with a long beard and a pointed blue hat, all right? And then he said, what's this? What do you want? And why do you smell so bad? And all this while, he made a voice, all right? He modulated his voice to suit an old man's voice. And he thought, this old man voice suits me as well, all right? So that voice was one of his specialty, the wizard's voice. I know it, Roger Skunk said, and all the little animals run away from me. The enormous wise owl said, you could help me. So Roger Skunk said, yes, I know I smell very bad. I don't need you to tell me again and again, all right? And because that I smell so bad, all the other animals run away from me. And the wise old owl on the tree told me that you could help me. Well, maybe, said the wizard. Come on in. Don't get too close. Now inside, Joe, there were all these magic things all jumbled together in a big dusty heap because the wizard did not have any cleaning lady. Why? Why? Because he was a wizard and a very old man. Will he die? No, wizards don't die. Well, he rummaged around and found an old stick, called a magic wand, and asked Roger Skunk what he wanted to smell like. Roger thought and said, roses. I want to smell like roses. Yes, good, Joe said smugly. Jack fixed her with a trance-like gaze and chanted in the wizard's elderly, irritable voice. Abracadabra, hocus po, Roger Skunk, how do you do? Roses, boses, pull and ear, Roger Skunk, you never fear, bingo. So finally, Roger Skunk, along with the wizard, went inside the house, and the father starts describing the wizard's house to the daughter. And he says that it was all a dusty heap inside, all it had not been cleaned for a long time. And again, as usual, as was her recent routine, she started questioning her father. She said, why wasn't it cleaned? And the father replied, well, he did not have a cleaning lady. And again the daughter said, why? And the father replies, well, because he is old. And then the daughter again says, but since he is old, will he die? And the father replies, well, he is a wizard and wizards don't die. And from that dusty heap, the wizard took out a magic wand, all right? And then he said and then he got ready to say some spells. And he said, Roger Skunk, you tell me, what do you want to smell like? And Roger Skunk thought, and he finally said, I want to smell like roses. And Joe was very happy. Yes, she said. And then he said some magic spells, and the magic was done. He paused, a rapt expression widened out from his daughter's nostril, forcing her eyebrows up and her lower lip down in a wide, noiseless grin. An expression in which Jack was startled to recognize his wife, feigning pleasure at cocktail parties. And all of a sudden, he whispered, the whole inside of the wizard's house was full of the smell of roses. Roses, Roger Fish cried. And the wizard said, very cranky, that will be 7 pennies. So he paused the story, then he noticed his daughter making an expression out of her face which reminded her of his wife. And she made that expression when she was faking pleasure, when she was acting as if she is happy, but then in reality she was not, all right? And she saw that same expression on his daughter's face. And then he continued with the story and he said, suddenly the wizard's room started smelling of roses, all right? And then the wizard said, now Roger's fish, you smell like roses. You pay me 7 pennies. And you know that the story was actually about Roger Skunk. And the father got carried away, all right? Since the same story was being said almost every day. So he got mixed up and he said Roger Fish, to which the daughter suddenly said, Daddy. And father says, what? Roger Skunk. You said Roger Fish. So she corrected him, telling him that the story is about Roger Skunk, and not about Roger Fish. Yes, Skunk, said the father. You said Roger Fish. Wasn't that silly? Very silly of our stupid old daddy, of your stupid old daddy. Where was I? Well, You know about the pennies. Say it. Okay. Roger Skunk said, but all I have is 4 pennies. And he began to cry. Joe made the crying face again, but this time without a trace of sincerity. This annoyed Jack. Downstairs, some more furniture rumbled. Claire shouldn't be moving heavy things. She was 6 months pregnant. It would be their third. So when the father continued the story, he said that the wizard asked for 7 pennies, but Roger Skunk had only 4. And when he said that Roger Skunk was short of pennies, Joe made a face which signified that she was sad, all right? But her father could make out that she was only pretending to be sad, all right? Because she knows the story. The father has been telling the same story, all right, about some Roger animal getting in some kind of trouble, taking advice from the owl, going to the wizard, solving the problem, the wizard asking for a certain amount to be paid in pennies, that particular Roger animal not having that particular set of pennies, and then again the wizard telling that particular Roger animal where to find the extra pennies. So Joe knew that very well. And so she knew what was coming. So she only faked sadness, and that annoyed her father. And right at that moment, some more furniture was being moved downstairs. And the attention of Jack turned towards his wife again, Claire, because she was 6 months pregnant with his third child, and she shouldn't be moving all those furniture. So the wizard said, "Oh, very well. Go to the end of the lane and turn around 3 times and look down the magic well. And there you will find the 3 pennies. Hurry up." So Roger Skunk went to the end of the lane and turned around 3 times, and there in the magic well were 3 pennies. So he took them back to the wizard and was very happy and ran out into the woods. And all the other little animals gathered round him because he smelled so good. And they played tag, baseball, football, basketball, lacrosse, hockey, soccer, and pickup sticks. So when Roger Skunk was short of 3 pennies, the wizard told him, "Don't worry. You take this lane, turn around 3 times, you'll reach a magic well. And inside that magic well, you will find the 3 pennies that you need." And Roger Skunk followed the wizard's advice, and he went to the place the wizard had mentioned, and there, true enough, were 3 pennies. He took the 3 pennies, he already had 4 pennies, he paid the wizard 7 pennies, and then he came back very happy. He did not stink anymore, he was smelling of roses. And that day, all the other animals played with Roger because he wasn't stinking bad anymore. They played a lot of games, and then finally in the evening, all right, what's pickup sticks? It's a game you play with sticks, like the wizard's magic wand, kind of. And they played games and laughed all the afternoon, and then it began to get dark, and they all ran home to their mommies. So all throughout the day, Roger Skunk played with the animals, different games, basketball, football, lacrosse, pickup sticks, and Joe even wanted to know what pickup sticks was. And the father said, "It's just a game that you play with sticks." And she compared that stick to the wizard's wand, and she said, "Like the wizard's wand?" And father said, "Kind of," all right. He didn't go into much detail. And then Roger Skunk played till evening, and finally he went home to his mother along with the other animals. They all went to their own respective houses. Joe was starting to fuss with her hands and look out of the window. At the crack of the day that showed under the shade, she thought that story was all over. Jack didn't like women when they took anything for granted. He liked them apprehensive, hanging on to his words. Now, Joe, are you listening? So as usual, the story would come to an end at this juncture. The Roger animal returning home, his father coming to work from Boston, and then they having supper, all right? So Joe knew what was coming, and then her attention started diverting elsewhere, right? Since Roger Skunk already reached home. And his father didn't like that. He didn't like women to take anything for granted, all right? He wanted them to hold on to his word. And then he said, Joe, are you paying attention? Yes, said Joe, all right? And the father said, because this is very interesting. Roger Skunk's mommy said, what's that awful smell? So today he added a twist to the story, wherein the story didn't end where it usually did, all right? Roger Skunk reached home and his mother was very surprised, and she said, what is that awful smell? Because now you know that Roger Skunk is smelling of roses. What? Said daughter, all right, said his daughter, because she wasn't expecting that. And Roger Skunk said, it's me, mommy. I smell like roses. And she said, who made you smell like that? And he said, the wizard. And she said, well, of all the nerve, you come with me and we are going right back to that awful wizard. Joe sat up, with her hands dabbing in the air with genuine fright. But Daddy, then he said about the other little animals, run away. Her hand skittered off into the underbrush. All right, he said. But Mommy, all the other little animals run away. And she said, I don't care. You smelled the way a little skunk should have. And I'm going to take you right back to that wizard. And she took an umbrella and went back with Roger Skunk and hit that wizard right over the head. So the mother was not happy at all. And she said, we are going right back to the wizard and make you smell like you should. And Joe was very unhappy. All right? She was genuinely frightened. She sat up with her hands in the air and she started telling his father, but what about the other animals who were making fun of Roger Skunk? And then the father said, fine. Roger Skunk told his mother that, Mom, no other animal wants to play with me because I smell very bad. And the mother had replied, doesn't matter, all right? You smell the way a little skunk should. That is our natural smell. And we are going right back to the wizard and he is changing back. He's taking back the smell of roses and giving you your original smell. She takes her umbrella and then she goes to the wizard and hits the wizard over the head with her umbrella. And then the girl interrupted, the young girl, Joe. No, Joe said, and put her hand out to touch his lips. Yet even in her agitation did not quite dare to stop the source of truth. Inspiration came to her. Then the wizard hit her on the head and did not change that little skunk back. So she didn't like the idea of Skunk's mother hitting the wizard. All right? So she just jumped up and she pressed her hands against her father's lips. All right? And even she tried her creative best. She tried continuing the story. She said, and then the wizard hit her back and did not change the smell of Roger Skunk. No, he said. The wizard said, okay. And Roger Skunk did not smell of roses anymore. He smelled very bad again. And so the father continued and said, no, that is not the way the story is going to end. The wizard took back his smell and then Roger Skunk started smelling awful once again. He started stinking once again. But the other little animals, and she was concerned about Roger, but what about the other animals? All right? They didn't want to play with Roger when he was stinking, and now he's stinking yet again. Joanne, it's Daddy's story. Shall Daddy not tell you any more stories? Her broad face looked at him through sifted light, astounded. This is what happened then. Roger Skunk and his mommy went home and they heard woo woo, and it was the choo-choo train bringing Daddy Skunk home from Boston. And they had lima beans, celery, liver, mashed potatoes, and pie oh my for dessert. And when Roger Skunk was in bed, Mommy Skunk came up and hugged him, and she said he smelt like her little baby skunk again, and she loved him very much. And that's the end of the story. So he ended the story a bit differently than he usually did. And daughter Jo was a lot surprised over that, all right? And she said, "But daddy," and he said, "What? Then did the other animals run away?" No, because eventually they got used to the way he was and did not mind it at all. What's an even shilladi in a little while? That was a stupid mommy. So now she started having opinion about the skunk's mom. She said that she is a very stupid lady, all right? Roger skunk was smelling of roses after taking so much trouble, and then she took him back again to the wizard and hit the wizard and made Roger skunk smell like a skunk. He started smelling awful once again. All right. And then the father said, "It was not," he said with a rare emphasis, and believed from her expression that she realized he was defending his own mother to her, or something as odd. "Now I want you to put your big heavy head in the pillow and have a good long nap." He adjusted the shade so not even a crack of day showed, and tiptoed to the door in the pretense that she was already asleep. But when he turned, she was crouching on top of the covers and staring at him. "Hey, get under the covers and fall fast asleep. Bobby's asleep," and Bobby is Joe's 2-year-old brother. She stood up and bounced gingerly on the springs. "Daddy." "What?" "Tomorrow, I want you to tell me the story that the wizard took the magic wand and hit that mommy." Her plump arms chopped forcefully right over the head. "No, that's not the story. The point is that the little skunk loved his mommy more than he loved all the other little animals. And she knew what was right." So this is where we are talking about parenting skills. All right, this is where we are talking about the introduction that I gave you in the beginning. Even though it's just a story and the story is already over, Joe is still debating with her father over the fact that what the mother did was wrong. That all Roger Skunk wanted was to be accepted by the other little animals, and then that he wanted to smell good. All right, that was her daughter's view. And Jack's view, the father's view, was that parents know best about what is good for their children. All right. And he even defends that, saying that mother knows best. And he even goes to the extent of saying that Roger Skunk loved his mother more than he loved all the other friends that he had. That is why he listened to his mother and he was happy. "No, tomorrow you say he hit that mommy. Do it." She kicked her legs up and sat down on the bed with a great heave and complaint of springs, as she had done hundreds of times before, except that this time she did not laugh. "Say it, Daddy." "Well, we will see. Now at least have a rest. Stay on the bed. You're a good girl." So she wouldn't let go of that idea. All right? She was still very opposed to the mother's decision to go and hit the wizard and change Roger Skunk's smell of roses to the smell of skunk again. All right? She would not give up that idea. She said, "You have to tell the story where the wizard punishes the mother." And the father finally gives in and he says, "Well, we'll see tomorrow, all right? Not today. You're a good girl. You go to sleep today. We'll talk about it tomorrow during story time." He closed the door and he went downstairs. Claire had spread the newspaper and opened the paint can, and wearing an old shirt of his on top of her maternity smock, was stroking the chair rail with a dipped brush. Above him, footsteps vibrated, and he called, "Joanne, shall I come up there and spank you?" The footsteps hesitated. "That was a long story," Claire said. So finally he went down and he saw a view of his wife. She was wearing his old shirt over her maternity dress, all right, because she was pregnant. She was wearing loose-fitting clothes. And she was trying to paint the stair railing, all right. And as he was coming down, he could hear someone walking in the room upstairs, and he knew it was his daughter. And he said, "Joanne, should I come up there and spank you? Should I hit you?" And then the movement stopped. And when he finally went down to reached his wife, she said, "Well, that was a long story today." "The poor kid," he answered, and with utter weariness watched his wife labor. The woodwork, a cage of mouldings and rails and baseboards all around them, was half old tan and half new ivory, and he felt caught in the ugly middle position. And though he as well felt his wife's presence in the cage with him, he did not want to speak with her, work with her, touch her, anything. And even the father at the end of the story, he finds himself in the middle of things, all right? He looks at half the room, it has been freshly painted. He looks at the other half, it still holds the old paint and it is not being touched by the new. And he finds the atmosphere very strange. He finds himself in the middle of a thing which he fails to understand, all right? And in that moment of time, he doesn't want to speak with his wife. He doesn't want to help his wife. He just stands there. And with that, the story comes to an end, all right? And with this, we complete the 5th chapter, that is, Should Visit Hit Mommy, the 5th chapter of your text, Vistas, all right? And at the end of the chapter, there are 6 questions, all right? What is the moral issue that the story raises? Number 1. Number 2, how does Joe want the story to end and why? Number 3, why does Jack insist that it was the wizard that was hit and not the mother? Number 4, what makes Jack feel caught in the middle ugly position? Number 5, what is your stance regarding the 2 endings to the Roger Skunk story? Alright, there are 2 stories, remember, 2 ends to the story. One the daughter's ending, one the father's ending. So what is your take on it? And number 6, why is an adult's perspective on life different from that of a child? Why is it, alright, what according to you is the reason that adults and children think differently? And so, I want you to attempt these 6 questions in your class copies, and then I want you to do it in your fair copies as well, alright? Now, as you are going through the video, I want you to go through it line by line, underline all the difficult words that you encounter and look up for its meaning in the dictionary as well, alright? And in the coming days, we'll be completing other chapters as well, and I hope that you have completed all the previous chapters so far, alright? I am giving you the benefit of the doubt, taking for granted you are the senior most students of the school and you are responsible enough to look after your own interests. And with that, I end today's lesson. Have a very good afternoon, and then please do attempt the questions. Good day.